special presentation. The debate for the United States Senate race in New York between Democratic Senator Kirsten Gillibrand and Republican opponent Chele Farley. Here is your moderator, Bill Ritter.
Hello, everyone. I'm Bill Ritter of Channel 7 Eyewitness News. Thank you for being here to watch this. Election Day, a week from Tuesday, November 6th. Today, the one and only debate between the candidates for the U.S. Senate in New York. And we welcome the candidates, Democratic incumbent Kirsten Gillibrand and Republican challenger Chele Farley. This half-hour debate is being streamed live on ABC7 NY, on our news app, as well as all of our social media pages, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And we are broadcasting this debate as well in its entirety, coming up on Up Close, Channel 7, Sunday morning at 11 o'clock. Now, the rules are simple. Each candidate will have 45 seconds to answer a question, 30 seconds for any rebuttals that might happen. By coin toss, the first question goes to Ms. Gillibrand, and we are going to get right to it. Senator, we saw this week many forms of domestic terrorism in the country and especially here in New York. A growing number of explosive devices delivered to offices and homes of people who have been critical of the president, including those of two former presidents, and the New York headquarters for a worldwide cable TV news channel. The bigger picture is some people believe this represents a kind of all-time low for political discourse in America in terms of vitriol and anger. If you are reelected, Senator, how will you try to end this vitriol?
Well, I first want to thank the first responders and law enforcement who kept people safe in these attacks. And we have to obviously take terrorism very seriously. Since 9/11, New York is still the #1 terror target, so I work very hard to make sure we have the resources for our first responders to fight terrorism. And we have to hold these particular terrorists accountable for these heinous acts. And to be clear, no one is responsible for those attacks except for those terrorists. But to your broader question, as a mom of young kids, I've been very concerned about the climate. We've seen a rise in hate crimes across New York in all instances: anti-Semitism, racism, anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant, homophobia. And so I believe we need to have a role model in the White House. I don't think this president has done that, and he's unfortunately been divisive and really put hate into the climate. So I believe we need to bring people together, fight for what's right, care about one another, and remember that's who we are as a country.
All right, thank you, Senator. Ms. Farley, same question to you. If you are elected U.S. Senator from New York, how will you try to end the vitriol that has infected this country?
This is an act of terrorism. It's got to stop. But my opponent, Senator Gillibrand, wants to abolish ICE, which is the group that actually is primarily responsible for stopping terror. We can't allow that to happen. ICE was the group that took 796 members of the brutal MS-13 gang off the streets last year. MS-13 is the gang that uses knives and machetes to hack to death our teenagers. I have teenagers. We don't want that to happen to them or to anyone. We've got to get to the bottom of this, and we've got to stop terrorism entirely.
Okay, well, you brought up immigration, and let's make that our question number 2. Right now, a humanitarian crisis is developing in Mexico. Thousands of people fleeing poverty, crime, and chaos in their country, their home country of Honduras, walking in Mexico, trying ultimately to seek asylum here in the United States. This caravan, perhaps a microcosm of the immigration issue and problem in general. This question, Ms. Farley, is to you. Should the people who are seeking asylum be allowed into the United States?
It is a real problem, but there are 14,000 people. People are calling it a caravan. I call it an invasion. We can't allow open borders. We don't know who's coming across our border. They could be members of ISIS. Frankly, they could be members of MS-13. We have to stop it. But the real issue here is we've got to get comprehensive immigration reform. We've got to stop this problem once and for all. There was an offer on the table, and Senator Gillibrand wouldn't vote for it. That is the problem in Washington. We actually need to create solutions rather than to keep battling over the issues. We need a comprehensive immigration reform plan, and I will do it when I'm in D.C.
Senator, same question to you.
To be very clear, I do not support open borders, and neither do Democrats. But what we have in this country is an immigration crisis. You have people coming in this caravan to seek asylum in this country. Immigration has always been a strength for this country. We are a country founded by immigrants. Our diversity is our strength. It creates entrepreneurialism and innovation. And so we need to fix our broken immigration system. But separating children from their parents at the border is immoral. That is what this president has done. He has demonized demonized immigrants throughout this country, which is wrong, morally wrong. So we need an immigration system that actually works. And that means making sure that you have an asylum process, real immigration judges to process those claims, not locking families up in for-profit prisons who are just seeking our asylum and our protection. That's what the Statue of Liberty stands for. That's what this country has always stood for.
Just directly to the question, should these people be allowed into the United States seeking asylum?
They should be allowed to have asylum claims be reviewed by judges who are not beholden to the Attorney General, real judges who have given certain terms to do the work. They should be processed properly in a humane way, as was done under President Obama, and they should be able to have their claims be heard.
Ms. Farley, a quick rebuttal?
Absolutely. I don't believe that we should be separating children either. We definitely need more judges at the border to solve these problems, but we've also got to worry about the children who are here at home. The latest CBS just came out with something talking about 10 and 11-year-old children are now being recruited for MS-13. But we need comprehensive immigration reform. It was on the table. We need to solve the problem of the Dreamers. They were brought here, through no fault of their own, and we need to solve this.
Okay, thank you.
Just to respond,
yeah.
Everyone believes that MS-13 gang members should be arrested. In fact, our law enforcement is doing that excellent work right now. And if they are immigrants, they should be arrested, punished, and deported. There is no debate on that issue.
Okay, thank you both. Quick response?
Well, however, ICE is the group that actually is doing that, and ICE is the group that you want to abolish.
So ICE was formed in 2003 after 9/11 for the purpose of doing anti-terrorism, anti-criminal cross-border transactions, anti-human trafficking. But under this president, who has diverted resources from that important anti-terrorism work to enforcement and removal operations, separating children at the border, putting people in for-profit prison systems, not using asylum claims properly. And so what you're seeing here is an agency that's not working, and that's why 19 ICE agents disagree with you. 19 ICE agents wrote to the Homeland Security Department and said, we need to disband ICE because our reputation has been so destroyed that we cannot do the anti-terrorism work that we are supposed to do because President Trump keeps giving all the money to the for-profit prison systems and the removal operations.
Right.
So fix the broken system, make sure the reputational problems that ICE is facing no longer harm it, because if communities don't participate in helping get rid of terrorism, law enforcement cannot do their jobs. And that is why my opponent misrepresents what this issue is very much about.
You were the one who said just here in Central Park that you wanted to abolish ICE. Are you changing your story again? You keep flip-flopping on the issues.
No,
we need to keep ICE. We need to basically protect our borders. We need to make sure that we protect our citizens at home.
We need to protect our borders. We need comprehensive immigration reform. But the reason why ICE is failing, as the 19 ICE agents have said, is because their reputation has been destroyed. Because ICE agents are now arresting grandparents who are visiting their son-in-law at Fort Drum.
But ICE agents arrested the 796.
They are arresting people who are in their green card interviews. And so as a consequence, the important mission of anti-terrorism isn't being done. So you need to get rid of that. You need to reimagine it under a different agency and have better oversight and accountability so they can do the anti-terrorism mission and not continue their efforts of separating children and babies at the border.
I appreciate this. I want to wrap this up. You got the last one.
Senator, we keep talking, but nothing is actually getting done. We need comprehensive immigration reform. There was a deal on the table to solve the problem with the Dreamers, and you voted against it. We actually need to be making actions and doing things rather than constantly talking.
We have a lot of other important issues to go through, as emotional perhaps and certainly complicated as immigration. The next one is health care. And Senator, you get this question. Polls show that the issue of health care is the one that most concerns America, especially this election. The Trump administration and Congress tried to cut Obamacare, but what remains of Obamacare is more popular than ever and a lifeline for so many millions of Americans. What, in your opinion, is the long-term fix to our health care system?
I believe that health care should be a human right and not a privilege. Unfortunately, my opponent and this president wants to continue to undermine health care as a right, wanting to allow insurers to charge as much as they want if you have a pre-existing condition. I believe people should have access to the life-saving health care they need. So I believe in Medicare for all, because if you had a not-for-profit public option, if you had a system where you could have access to health care that you need, you would have an ability to have preventive care and people with pre-existing conditions to get get the coverage they want. My opponent stands with the president. She touts his endorsement, who has done nothing but undermine basic health care for Americans and for New Yorkers.
Okay, thank you, Senator. Ms. Farley, same question to you.
Absolutely. Our health care costs are spiraling out of control. Yes, I do actually think we should only repeal it, but if we can replace it with something that actually takes care of pre-existing conditions and keeps children under 26 on their parents' policies. However, I'm absolutely not in favor of Medicare for all. The senator wants to do this, but most importantly, how are you going to pay for it? It is estimated to cost $32 trillion over 10 years. That's $3.2 trillion a year. That is effectively doubling the entire federal budget. How are you going to pay for it, Senator?
The way you pay for it is the amount of money that people spend today on health care is more than that number you cited. So under a Medicare for All proposal, because you're taking the insurance companies out of the equation, insurance companies do not have the same goals as you and I. They do not care about your health. They do not care about if you need that second day in the hospital or that medicine. So we have to be willing to take on the insurers who are for-profit companies that pay their CEOs millions of dollars and get them out of the equation. Money should be going directly to health care, and you will save money under Medicare for All. You also need to take on the drug companies. And if you're unwilling to take on the drug companies, you will never get the cost of medicines down. My opponent's unwilling to do that, so is the president that she supports, and that's why we need
Ms. Farley?
Medicare for all.
The senator keeps putting words in my mouth, but the real issue here is, where have we ever seen the government ever be able to save money and actually have cost savings? Let's take a look at an example of a country that has socialized medicine, the UK. And in the UK, it takes a year to see a specialist. It takes a year to get surgery. Do you want that? Absolutely not. What she is proposing means that no one will be allowed to have employer health care. If you like your health care, will you be able to keep it? The answer is no. But most importantly, that $32 trillion cost over 10 years means that your taxes would have to double. Do you want your taxes to double?
Okay, thank you both. Another hot button issue, especially in New York and the Northeast and in California, is taxes. This is going to start with Ms. Farley. The uber wealthy and corporations got a very big tax break this year from the Trump Republican tax reform bill. But many middle and upper middle income people in our area will get tax increases because most of their deductions for state and local income and real estate taxes have been wiped out. They will feel a pinch come April 15th. Will you, if you're elected, try to get that back, those deductions back for New Yorkers? And if so, how?
Absolutely. I mean, where were you, Senator? I mean, when we lost the SALT deduction, Senator D'Amato was able to save the SALT deduction in the 1980s. I would have been at that table negotiating to get a better deal. Right now, there wasn't anybody there negotiating for these high-tax states. We need somebody to focus on that. It's ridiculous when we've only got a $10,000 cap and the average property tax bill in Westchester is $19,000 a year. Yes, I will go to Washington and I will increase that cap. But in addition, I'm also proposing a deduction for renters. Why is it that renters can't deduct their rent off of their taxes the same way that people can deduct the interest on their mortgage? It's only fair, and it will help reduce the amount of money that we're sending to Washington.
Senator?
So we need middle-class tax cuts, and unfortunately, this president put forward a tax plan that my opponent supports this president every step of the way and would not hold him accountable. She's not holding him accountable on anything up until now. In fact, that tax gave enormous tax breaks to the wealthiest New Yorkers, the wealthiest Americans, and really left the middle class with very little. In fact, in New York, because they took away the state and local deduction, it's harming New Yorkers. Our average deduction is $17,000 and the cap's at 10. And so we need a president who cares about middle class families and isn't going to give giveaways. That tax bill was written behind closed doors by lobbyists and special interest groups to continue to line the pockets of the wealthy. I called out the tax plan. I've stood up to President Trump every step of the way. And that's why we need to make sure we have representatives in Congress that share the New York values of supporting middle-class taxes. Supporting middle-class tax cuts for those who need it the most.
Ms. Farley, many of your Republican colleagues, congressmen especially, voted no on the tax plan and could not lobby their colleagues in Congress to get the deductions.
The real issue was that every vote mattered in the Senate. And Senator Gillibrand, in exchange for her vote, could have gotten that increase in the cap, but she didn't do it. I would definitely do it. Hey, look, my taxes went up. This was a bad deal for so many New Yorkers. We needed to negotiate it. I negotiate for a living, and that's what I will do.
Senator Gillibrand, your response?
Well, I just wanted to respond to her renter's idea. The reason why her idea is flawed is because it's a tax deduction as opposed to a tax credit. Under her plan, if you're a millionaire in a penthouse apartment, you're going to get a massive tax cut. You don't need that tax cut. It's the problem with the Trump tax bill. It's the problem with her renter's plan. So it should be a tax credit so that people who desperately need it, who can't afford housing, can have access, because I think access to housing should also be a human right.
Okay.
Can I respond?
Yes, ma'am.
So Senator Gillibrand is spending a lot of time running around the country running for president. She does not know the terms of my proposal, which are it is capped at $3,000 a month. This is not for the millionaires. It is for the middle class who desperately need a break. $3,000 a month, $36,000 a year off the top of your federal taxes. Less money paid to Uncle Sam.
I do want to use this as a springboard to ask you about the campaign running for president, because Senator Gillibrand, you have not spent a lot of money in this re-election campaign for the U.S. Senate. In fact, you have millions of dollars in your campaign coffers. Many, including your opponent, say you are saving that money to gear up for a presidential run in 2020. Can you tell New Yorkers who plan to vote for you on November 6th that you will, if re-elected, serve out your 6-year Senate term?
I will, and I spend my time going to all 62 counties. I'm the only person who can say that we've done that up here. I've also held 16 town halls, and I have a 17th one on Friday in Buffalo. I'm running a modern campaign, and modern campaigns today are run by the grassroots, and so I'm making sure that I'm taking my request for their vote directly to the voters, and to make sure that voters can be heard. That's why I hold the town halls. That's why I've made myself available in all 62 counties.
Just want to make this clear. You're saying you will not get out of the race and you will not run for president. You will serve your 6 years.
I will serve my 6-year term.
Okay. Ms. Farley.
Honestly, I don't believe that, considering the fact that this is the 3rd day she's been in New York in the entire month of October, when she's been in 5 other states, including New Hampshire, in this month. And then about those town halls, I support the town halls. The only problem is you've been paying for them out of your Senate campaign. And this means the taxpayer, not out of the campaign, out of your Senate, and so the taxpayers are paying those. We absolutely need somebody who's going to fight hard for New York. And we don't need somebody who's going to be working, running for president, right after they get reelected. And I will only run for the U.S. Senate.
Senator?
I think campaigning for other candidates around our state and around the country is important. We need a Congress that actually supports the values of New York voters. That means making sure health care is a right and not a privilege, making sure anybody who wants to be working hard can be working hard, and having the right job training. And that's why it's important for me to support women running for office. We need to change the players list. Washington is broken. It is corrupt. We need to get money out of politics. That's why I've banned corporate PAC money in my campaign, whereas my opponent, in fact, has dark money ads being run in her favor.
Response, Ms.
Interestingly, yes. So Senator Gillibrand has accepted $5 million of corporate money. If she feels so strongly about corporate money, she should return that money. She has it sitting in her coffers, ready to run for president.
Okay. Response to that?
I've banned corporate PAC money from my campaign because I want to send a message to voters that it's their voice that matters. We need to get money out of politics. We need to have publicly funded elections. One of the most important things we could do is get money out of politics and have the kind of transparency and accountability that is so desperately needing. That's why I banned corporate PAC money.
Moving on to the next issue, you mentioned women and women running for office, record number of women running for office. One of the issues this year that has divided men and women and many Americans was what happened this summer with the Supreme Court nomination of Brett Kavanaugh. Ms. Farley, if you had been a U.S. Senator this year, how would you have voted on the Brett Kavanaugh Supreme Court nomination, and why?
Well, I would have voted for him, but most importantly, I also would have met with him. Senator Gillibrand didn't meet with him at all. In fact, she even admitted that she'd never read any of his opinions. That is your job, is to actually meet with the candidates for Supreme Court. It is one of the most important jobs. But I think one of the biggest issues we've got here is that the senator all of a sudden now seems to be in favor of guilty. She's against guilty until proven innocent. And she's abandoned due process. I have teenage sons. I worry about them living in this life. We cannot do that. But most of all, if she calls herself the Me Too senator, she should return the $800,000 in funds that she received from the law firm for Harvey Weinstein.
Senator?
Judge Kavanaugh's record was very clear. I read his opinions. Unfortunately, my opponent has the same relationship to the facts that President Trump does, who she supports. I've read his decisions. I knew exactly what his positions were, and he was very harmful to New York. He does not believe in women's reproductive freedoms. He does not believe that our free speech rights are as important as corporate free speech rights. In fact, he would support an insurer who wants to charge you more because you have a pre-existing condition. And add to that, beyond his record, how he performed at the last hearing. Not only did he treat colleagues with utter disrespect by speaking over senators, by alleging a partisan conspiracy theory, his demeanor, his character is absolutely inappropriate for a Supreme Court justice. So I stand by my vote, and I can't imagine why, if she wants to represent New Yorkers, she would vote yes.
Ms. Farley?
I think it is very important that Judge Kavanaugh had the opportunity to have his say, and that Dr. Ford had her say, and that the FBI did an investigation, but they were not able to corroborate any of those claims. So I absolutely would have voted for Justice Kavanaugh, but I think it is very important that we make sure someone is innocent until proven guilty, and we have to have due process.
Okay. Another hot button issue that is a sign of the time. Senator Gillibrand, this to you to begin. The United Nations earlier this month issued a report on climate change, a report that is bleak if, they say, we don't start transforming the world economy right now. In fact, they predict food shortages, wildfires, the killing of the coral reefs, all happening over the next 2 decades. What would you do if reelected to deal with climate change?
I think we have to take global climate change very seriously. Not only have we seen it in the real life impacts to New Yorkers with severe weather, with flooding, Superstorm Sandy, Tropical Storm Lee. All of these storms have devastated families, homes, killed people, and destroyed communities. But we also need to do very proactive ideas like putting a price on carbon. We should have a carbon exchange. We should actually promote innovation and green energy. Entrepreneurial and innovation is such a big opportunity for us if we invest in renewable energy sources. We should be investing in wind and solar and geothermal and biofuels, not being beholden to Middle Eastern oil.
Ms. Farley, if you were elected senator, what would you do to deal with climate change?
Well, the interesting thing is, so we pulled out of the Paris Accords. However, of all of the countries that were signatories to the Paris Accords, we were the only one who actually reduced our carbon emissions by 0.5 percentage point. So clearly, we seem to be doing something right. And we know that there is global climate change, but it is not American climate change. The U.S. is going to continue to do, but the major polluters are China and India. We've got to hold them responsible, and we'll do everything we can. We know the climate is changing, but we've got to balance it out with economic interests and keep America's interests at heart.
That's why New York needs a senator who will stand up to President Trump. Not only did he back away from the global climate accords in Paris, but he's failed to show any world leadership on this important issue. He does not want to not be beholden to Middle Eastern oil. He won't even stand up to Saudi Arabia. He does not have any interest in actually addressing severe weather and global climate change. And he showed an absence of leadership on issues that we desperately need.
All right, quick response, or I'm going to ask you the next question.
Next question.
Okay, next question. We started this debate, Ms. Farley, talking about vitriol and anger from ardent backers of President Trump to even some opponents of the president as well. If elected, how will you try to work across the aisle to try to bring some civility back to the Senate and to Congress as a whole?
We absolutely need to bring civility back to D.C. People ask me if I can reach across the aisle. Well, in fact, I reach across the kitchen table every day. My husband is a big Democrat from a very famous New York Democratic family. Jim Farley is his great uncle. But I think we need to do this. Look, I am asked about the president all the time, and I voted for him. I support the president when his policies are good for New York, and so many of them are. Our economy is booming, 4% growth rate, unemployment is at all-time lows. But when their policies are not good for New York, like the tax bill, I will negotiate and make them better. The goal is to focus on New York, not running for president like my opponent.
Senator, you have battled the president for nearly 2 years on issues that Democrats have lost in the Republican-controlled Senate. Are there issues you're willing to compromise with the president and members of the Republican Party?
So candidate Trump ran on a few things I thought were pretty exciting, like having a national paid leave plan. Unfortunately, President Trump doesn't follow through on his campaign promises. He ran on issues like health care should be universal and more affordable, but he will not support the Affordable Care Act and tries to undermine it every step of the way. But I do work on a bipartisan basis every day. I have more than 24 bipartisan bills, many of which have already been passed in this Congress and signed by President Trump, including making sure we have Made in America, manufacturing investments, making sure we have better STEM education for our students and our teachers, making sure we can help our first responders, our policemen and firefighters who are fallen in the line of duty, making sure the benefits are returned to their spouses.
Okay. We're running out of time. I do want to get a little lightning round and ask you a couple of questions.
Can I just do a quick response to this?
Very briefly.
Okay, very brief. The senator talks about all of these bills that have gotten passed. In fact, she's only gotten one actual bill passed to rename a post office. A lot of these bills, frankly, sound fantastic, but if they don't get passed, they don't help the people of New York.
All the bills I mentioned have been passed, in addition to passing the 9/11 health bill twice, repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell, passing the Stock Act. If you don't believe me, just ask Chris Collins whether the Stock Act, which bans insider trading, was passed into law. If you don't believe me, just ask any first responder who was responsible for passing the 9/11 health bill.
The Zadroga Act was fantastic, but your name wasn't on the bill. But any New York senator should have been supportive of that. The idea is we need to get more done.
I led the bill, I led the advocacy, and I got the bill done. Having your name on something is not the relevant thing. It's whether you fought for it, whether you got it done, and whether you made the bill a law. And all those other bills that I just mentioned are part of larger bills. That's how work is done in Washington. You don't get your name on it just because you worked on it. It might be in a much larger bill where you can actually get something done, like a defense bill, like a spending bill.
Well, Senator Schumer's gotten 31 bills passed during his time in the Senate. And I know you took credit for bringing this defense spending to New York, which I absolutely support, the $199 million. The only problem is you voted against the actual bill.
The reason why I vote against the defense bill is because there's a provision in it that allows low-yield nuclear weapons to be not only produced, but used strategically without any congressional oversight. And I felt that issue was so important that it demanded a no vote.
But then why take credit for something when you voted?
Because the substance of the legislation in the bill was written by me to respond to New Yorkers' needs.
We want to go to closing arguments now. Thank you for a lively debate so far. I want to go to closing arguments. 90 seconds. By coin toss, Senator, you're going to go first.
Thank you for allowing us to participate in this debate. As a public servant, I've worked really hard to make sure that members of Congress play by the same rules as everybody else and that we have oversight and accountability. It's why I post my earmarks, my schedule, my financial disclosure, and my taxes online. It's also why I banned corporate PAC donations into my campaign. But Washington really has been broken, and so I've done my best to reach across party lines to get things done for New York. That's why we passed the 9/11 health bill twice. We passed the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. We passed the Stock Act, and we passed a lot of legislation to help the economy grow. Things like Made in America provisions so we can invest in manufacturing in New York, a better education for STEM so more communities of color and more women can get opportunities for those fast-growing jobs, making sure we can have more employee ownership. But there's a lot of work still left to be done, and that's why I would like to serve more in the Senate for another 6 years so I can do things like actually pass a national paid leave plan. We're the only industrialized country in the world that doesn't have paid leave. We need to have better workforce training. No matter where I've traveled in New York, people want to make sure that their health care is there. That's why we need to guarantee health care as a right and not a privilege. But we also need to get the money out of politics. We need publicly funded elections. We have to return our democracy to the people to make sure people is one person, one vote, and get rid of the influence that the special interests have. The reason why we've never passed a gun reform bill is because the NRA has a stranglehold on Congress because of the money they give to members of Congress. We have to get money out of the drug industry because they spend so much money on members of Congress, and that's why we can't get Medicare for all or actually lower drug prices or take on the opioid crisis. So I still want to serve this state because there's so much work left to be done for hardworking New Yorkers.
Senator, thank you. Ms. Farley, you have 90 seconds.
Absolutely. I asked Senator Gillibrand 3 questions. How are you going to pay for your $32 trillion cost of Medicare for all? Why won't you return the $800,000 in tainted money from Harvey Weinstein's lawyers? And are you running for president? I am living in New York. I'm raising my sons in New York, unlike Senator Gillibrand, who has been living in D.C. for the last 12 years. During that time, 1 million people have left New York. Our upstate economy is in shambles. Our infrastructure is falling apart. And of course, our taxes are going up. I want to use my negotiating skills to bring back the $48 billion that New York loses every single year and use it to create jobs, improve our infrastructure, lower our taxes, and give renters a tax deduction for their rent up to $3,000 a month. I'm in favor of term limits. I believe that we should all only have 2 terms, 12 years. Senator Gillibrand has had her 12 years. New York deserves a senator who's going to be focused on them, who's going to work hard for New York. I am Chele Farley. I want to be the senator to put New York first, and I am asking for your vote.
Chele Farley, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, I thank you both for a lively and straightforward debate. Appreciate it. Good luck to both of you on November 6th. And thank you for watching today. This is such an important part of our democracy. We're talking about voting, and we hope this debate has helped you become a more informed voter. That, too, is a very important part of democracy. Most crucial, of course, is to actually go out and vote on November 6th. That is the backbone of our country. It is our right, but it is also our duty, and I hope you exercise that right and duty on November 6th.